Dear viewer, or two, how about a new build for Skyrim? I called this one the Divine Avenger because it is inspired by the Dungeons & Dragons character class called the Avenger. It is a kind of a sacred duelist, a holy warrior wearing no armor and wielding a huge weapon in both hands. She is sworn to eradicate the undead and all kinds of evil from Skyrim and beyond. She doesn't waste her time and strength to deal with minions and lesser soldiers. She always goes directly for the boss, while her magical powers rebuke or disable all the weaker foes around her. It makes for a great character both in gameplay and roleplay. So, let's get to it. You were born a few years after the Great War, a child of poverty and lost hopes. You grew up in an orphanage in Cyrodiil, with no memories of your parents or any explanation for why you were abandoned. Years were coming and going filled with boring chores and the little struggles of childhood. You were almost an adult, and you feared you will have to leave the orphanage, which would most likely mean a life of a beggar for you. But one day a wandering priest stood at the doorstep of the orphanage, willing to adopt you. It was strange and slightly worrying that an old man would want to take a teenage girl with him. But you soon discovered there was nothing sinister in his motives. The man was a Talos worshipper, keeping it a secret for decades now, and he believed Talos himself wanted him to show you a way. The priest taught you how to defend yourself, how to heal others, and how to care for another person. Sadly, after a year of travels and many lessons, he passed away, leaving you alone again. By then, there was too many painful memories for you in Cyrodiil. You decided to leave for a place when you could openly worship Talos in honor of a man you now perceived as your father. You entered Skyrim with the feeling that something is wrong with this land and that you will make it right by any means at your disposal. You eradicate evil whenever you find it, because that is what your father would do. The whole point of her combat style is to overwhelm an enemy with a fury of lightning-fast blows, and achieving that with a simple two-handed sword and a robe. That will mean a heavy focus on alteration and restoration skills, which may mean, once more, a slightly tedious early game. That just begins to be my sort of thing by now, really. Just be warned, and at least consider starting your game on expert or even adept difficulty. If you ever played a restoration mage type of build, you probably know why. Don't get discouraged though, as this build can become incredibly deadly as soon as you start collecting your dragon shouts. The reliance on shouts is what I actually like the most in this particular one. My little backstory there made her an Imperial, however a Breton or a High Elf may all work very well with this build. Breton's natural magic resistance and the dragon skin racial power will work very well with the Atronach or Lord Standing Stones. However, the Imperial's Voice of the Emperor power will be useful for crowd control, which is the most important part of this build. The attributes ratio is shown on screen. You need a reliable health pool, as your maximum armor rating will be 350 with all the perks and spells. Now let's talk about the skills, which will be quite a lot of talking, unfortunately. First and foremost, you will need tons of perk points to put in your alteration skill. Take everything here but the dual casting perk, which is completely pointless, and master alteration, which you will have no use for. Other than that, every perk in this tree will be almost vital for your survival, including the underrated stability perk, which apparently affects your slow time shout, which is completely awesome and gives you less things to worry about in a prolonged combat encounter. And then in the restoration skill you will also need almost everything. The respite perk will help you a lot with power attacks and sprinting. Recovery paired with dual casting will let you rely on the dirty cheap low-tier healing spells for most of your playthrough, and recovery is great for builds such as this one, because it is usually advised to prioritize magicka value over magicka regeneration, but here you will cast 2, maybe 3 spells per combat at most, and then switch to your sword and voice. In the two-handed skill tree you don't need as many perks to make it useful, fortunately. However, you will need all 5 ranks of the barbarian perk because you will not be using that many crafting skills. You will never have an overpowered apparel with double enchantments, so your trusty Skyforged steel sword needs to be wielded with utmost mastery. In the destruction skill you only need novice, apprentice and adept to lower the cost of your cloak spells, which you will use in almost every battle. Dual casting will extend the range of said spells, which may be very nice addition in a crowded battle full of weaker enemies such as Reeklings or basic bandits. They will die like flies. Oh, sorry about that. This character is actually a very good person, so no for her. No. Let's move on. And the block skill, well, it really depends on your exact playstyle. However, I would advise to take at least 3 ranks in the shield wall perk, then maybe quick reflexes and power bash, and maybe the deadly bash perk as well. The quick reflexes has a nice sort of glitch exploit when the effect of the perk combines with the slow time shout effect. It doesn't really work all the time, so it's not very reliable, and it may be removed by the unofficial patches, but it is still something little cool addition to your combat style. For dealings with your non-undead enemies, the illusion skill will take the main role in crowd control tactics. With the dual-casted Pacify spell, you can disable a whole group of weaker enemies to focus on the bosses, and then maybe return to deal with the rest of them, or aside to spare their lives. The latter is what she would probably do, at least on occasion, since she is here mainly to kill the evil creatures like the undead, and dragons, and not to kill the people, right? And then there is a question of taking maybe a single perk in the smithing skill tree, namely the steel smithing perk. It is mainly for the improvement of your Skyforged steel greatsword. The inventory for this character is very limited, and that's a cool thing, I believe. You have your Amulet of Talos to reduce your shout cooldown time. And your Ethereal Crown for the times you don't need that much spell power. And of course, your Skyforged Steel Greatsword. It was chosen mainly because it is very perk effective, so to say. Remember, however, about upgrading it by any means necessary. Grind your smithing skill by making jewelry, for example. Pay for training, drink a blacksmith's elixir, buy or find a full set of fortified smithing apparel. There is a short list of spells this character will use in most of the fights. Try to prioritize the Ebony Flesh, because it is what would give you up to 350 armor rating when combined with the Lordstone. And with the addition of your Shouts and the Whirlwind Cloak, this armor rating will be more than sufficient in the most situations. If not, go for your restoration spells. Even the rather cheap fast healing spell will be a lifesaver when dual casted. Also, try to acquire the Agent of Mara ability to boost your magic resistance, and pray to Talos as often as you can to sustain his blessing, as it reduces the shout cooldown, and shouts will be, as has been said, a crucial part of your combat style. And speaking of your shouts, the list of your go-to shouts is now displayed on screen. First and foremost, learn and unlock all the words of the Elemental Fury shout. As you don't use an enchanted weapon, it will increase your damage output quite dramatically and let you deal with the big guys much more swiftly. Another one is the Marked for Death shout, which will help a lot against dragons, for example. From time to time, you will be able to use your Elemental Fury before the Marked for Death effect runs out, which means game over for even the fiercest Draugr in Skyrim. If you would like to use the Slow Time shout often, I would suggest to keep a full stock of Fortify Alteration potions, since it makes the effect of the shout last longer. And never forget about your Become Ethereal as well, especially in dragon fights. If you time it correctly, you can negate an entire breath attack of a dragon with a single word of this shout, and be prepared for more shouting in a matter of seconds. And of course, what other shout is better for crowd control than the classic Unrelenting Force? Overall, I would say the build does require a bit of patience and getting into proper timing of all your spells and shouts. Once mastered, though, it will give you an extraordinary sense of pride and accomplishment when you get to the point when you can slaughter an entire dungeon full of vampires with a rather cheap sword and the power of your voice. The alteration and delusion skills are rather easy and fast with their experience gain, so the early game will be over sooner than with many other builds. And that would be it for today. Hope you enjoyed the build as much as I did. If that is the case, check out my other builds and videos. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to give them a try. I hope you will have heaps of fun. We will, hopefully, see each other again. Bye bye.